No worries. All right, I've got Miss Leah Forney is as daughter, granddaughter, sister, friend, pre-licensed marriage and family therapist are some of the hats she wears. A native of Queens, New York, who is currently residing in Maryland, writing and speaking came naturally to her. Leah Forney is the oldest of 6 siblings. She grew up without her mother and father raising her. She learned early on the importance of having a relationship with Jesus Christ from her maternal grandmother who raised her in the church. Leah's love for writing came at a young age when she would pen poems to release the pain she felt from not having her parents in her life. Never knowing where her writings would take her, Leah penned her first book as she continues to accept the calling God has placed on her life. Leah is open to seeing where her gifts and talents will take her. She has released 7 books over the last 4 years. She is also a transformative speaker and sexual assault advocate. She is the podcast host of internationally streamed show Hey Queen Thrive. She has been coined the audience attraction coach for her ability to be able to assist her clients with solidifying his or her messaging to reach his or her intended audience. She is an award winner of I Am Her International Award Women on the Rise. She has been blessed to feature on 101 different media publications, including but not limited to internationally streamed Decide to Move podcast and the CEO Wife Experience. She's been blessed to land 5 partnerships with state and national organisations to lend her voice in the fight to end sexual violence. It sounds like you're doing a lot of good work there, Leah.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, and so you could explain a little bit more about this to me. You do a little bit of work with the survivors of sexual assault and violence and stuff like that, I believe, or you advocate for them?
I do. So I'm a sexual assault survivor myself. Well, I like to call myself a thriver because I always say there's a difference between surviving something and thriving through something.
Yep.
And so I got into the advocacy work because here in the United States of America, we have a backlog of untested rape kits. And so I was sexually assaulted in 2013, and my rape kit didn't get tested until June of last year, 2021.
Oh, wow.
So we're talking 8 years before I could bring my perpetrator to justice and receive closure. And so
were you successful in doing that?
I have. It's still an ongoing process.
Yeah.
But what sparked the activism in me was that when I got that call back in June of 2021, basically saying that they had tested my rape kit and what I wanted to do, I knew if I had to wait 8 years, I can only imagine how many other people were still waiting. And at the time, I didn't know that there was a backlog in the United States. So I began to do research, and I had a conversation with one of my colleagues who does gun violence advocacy out in Detroit. And she had suggested to start reaching out to some organizations that was already doing the work, already in the fight, and partner with them. And so that's what I did. And so I got partnered with one of the federal organizations here in Maryland and continue to do the fight with them and lend my voice and tell my story about not only being sexually assaulted, but how the backlog impacted me. Because again, I had to wait 8 years for some justice to happen.
Yeah, right. And so what's the sort of goal here? Is it to get more resources put towards it to sort of crunch down that backlog and get those kits analysed?
Yeah. So what has happened is each state has now been taking a look at their backlog, and there has been legislation that has been passed in each state to actually put money towards clearing that backlog, but also to prevent another backlog. So here in the state of Maryland, we are going back as far as from 2018 back and clearing that backlog because we got the laws changed here in 2018 to start really pushing money and legislation towards not only getting rid of the backlog, but how do we prevent it? So how do we make sure that law enforcement and the DA's office is doing their job, right, to ensure that this doesn't happen again? And so some of the things that we have found is that, like, law enforcement, for instance, at the time, they were using waivers. And so they would have victims of sexual assault sign a waiver basically saying they don't want their kid tested. Well,
wow.
if somebody's under pressure in the moment, right, you
Yeah.
don't really know what you're signing,
Yeah,
right? And
sort of under
so,
duress, yeah.
yeah, you're not clear what you're signing. And so, a lot of the victims and survivors that I've come in contact with, they didn't know what they were signing,
They've signed
or
these
they
waivers
signed
not
it.
fully aware of what they were signing at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah, they felt under pressure, and now we're going back and saying, well, one, do you know what you signed, and if you didn't, do you want to go forward and getting your rape kit tested? And I will say, the ones that have been successful, a lot of them have been like, yes, I want to prosecute, which is great, because now we get to keep shining the light on sexual assault, but then we also can finally do something about the perpetrators.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of horrible to think that there's people sort of perpetrating these crimes and then they're sort of basically getting away with it for all these years because of the backlog has not been analysed effectively.
Yeah.
And so you're saying you started this in Maryland. Is this being sort of adopted in other states and territories around the US?
So yeah, so in all 50 states here in the United States, we do have legislation in different states, and as it pertains to their backlog.
Yeah.
Really, how this came to light is there's an organization called Joyful Heart, which is actually founded by, if you ever watch Law and Order, it is the woman that plays Detective Benson, Marcika Hegarty. She is the one that actually put the spotlight on the backlog,
Wow.
and started making noise around, hey, why do we have all these kits sitting in warehouses? Because that's what was happening. Like, we had all these kits that were sitting in warehouses and nobody was doing anything about it. So because she started to shine the light on it, it really forced all the other states to begin to look and find out, well, what have people been doing with rape kits? And we discovered that a lot of law enforcement agencies had them sitting in warehouses, didn't send them to the crime lab, and so they had been sitting. Now, the heartbreaking part about that, and what I feel is the true injustice in this case, is that depending on the state that the crime took place in, will determine whether or not there's a statute of limitation or not. So even if someone is able to get their kit tested, it still doesn't necessarily mean that there can be any prosecution or conviction, because they're going to go based on what the law was at the time of the assault. And so if the statute of limitation is up, there's really no real closure that a survivor will get. And I feel like that alone is a true injustice.
Yeah, I don't feel like there should be a statute of limitations on these sorts of things. So yeah, that's an interesting point you bring up there. And I suppose you must have a lot of women that are very grateful for the work, and you're sort of helping them reach justice for crimes that have been perpetrated against them as well, yeah?
Yeah, I do. I do a lot of, here in Maryland, I've been blessed to do a lot of speaking out about it. I've been able to train law enforcement. I've been able to have conversations with the Attorney General. I'm getting ready to do a community town hall, which will happen in 2023, because between January and March in the state of Maryland is really where legislation is happening. Yep. And so now that we have like a new governor and all that stuff, now's the time to push and hold people accountable and be like, what are you going to do about this here in Maryland? So it's a lot of things that's coming down the pipeline. I have a conference that I'm going to be attending actually tomorrow, where we'll continue to have these conversations, because we're focusing on everyone, but one of the areas that I tend to train on is how do we help the underserved populations, like people of color, women of color, those in the LGBTQ population, transgenders, because those particular sexual assaults do not always get the spotlight like other races do.
Yeah, right, of course. Not always easy for them to get the same attention and stuff, and maybe sometimes not always have the same resources available to them. So, yeah, that's great what you're doing there, sort of being a voice for people that otherwise don't have the opportunity to be heard.
Yeah.
And about the podcast and stuff, I understand you're doing some podcast coaching as well.
I do. So I definitely, I started my own podcast. So Hey Queen Thrive started in January of 2021. So right there in the middle of a global pandemic,
Yeah, right.
I decided to create my own podcast. And from there, I found that I was really successful in it. It was something I love to do. And then I had people coming to me about, well, how to start a podcast. So that kind of led me into being in the coaching space and really helping others start, build, and launch their own podcast. And so it's been great. Like I have some really amazing clients that turned around and are now podcasters, and they're growing their podcast. And so it's been exciting to see.
Yeah, right. And the podcast you started, Hey Queen Thrive, what's that mainly revolved around?
So, Hey Queen Thrive is a show by a woman for women. We talk about everything pertaining to womanhood, from relationships to business to personal development, mindset. It has been evolving since it aired back in 2021. I have had some amazing guests. I'm an avid podcast listener.
Yep.
And so what made me create the show is that I really didn't hear too many shows, one, by women, but then also I didn't hear shows that highlighted like everyday people. And that's what I wanted my show to be. I wanted it to be a show that was highlighting everyday women that were doing amazing work. You know, sometimes you hear podcasts and they highlight, you know, celebrities and high-end influencers, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I wanted a show where I could highlight the woman next door, you know, who
maybe
is
people
doing
find that
amazing
a little bit
work.
more relatable as well.
Yeah, so that's why I created it.
No, absolutely. And with the coaching and stuff, so you've obviously found your sort of niche demographic there, and I understand that's doing well for you. And then you have people coming, are you sort of seeing they want to go down the same lines of, like, is it women podcasters wanting to create podcasts for women, or is it a little bit more diverse when you're coaching and people coming in with different ideas that they want to launch?
So it's definitely diverse. One of the things that most of the people that come to me outside of just learning how to start, they also want to learn how to grow their podcast. So how do they get their numbers up? They also want to learn, like, how do I monetize, or when can I monetize? So I definitely teach monetization strategies, because I think a lot of times people think that ads and sponsorship is kind of like the only way you can make money from podcasting. And right. I tell people all the time, I don't run ads or do sponsors, but really? I make money as a coach. So teaching them how to create their own signature program is something else that I coach them around, because everybody has their own unique experiences and expertise, and just teaching them how they can leverage that so they can make the money that they really desire to make.
Yeah, beautiful. And have you had many people sort of kick on from there and take your advice in launching their podcasts and go on to have successful podcasts?
Yeah, one of my current clients, we launched her podcast top of October, and like within 3 weeks, she hit international ranking. Oh, wow. She's still growing her podcast, and now we're working to craft her own signature program because she wanted to get into the coaching space. And so it's definitely a case-by-case situation, but all my programs, I make it customizable to the person. Yep. So depending on, you know, where they're coming in, I have had other clients who are already in the podcasting space, but they just wanted to learn, how do I grow it so that I can monetize? And then we work on that. So it definitely just depends on the client.
And I suppose that sort of wanting to grow podcasts, maybe ones that are already existing and stuff, that comes down to the 5 R's of influence, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And I was just doing a little bit of research. I came across the 5 R's of influence, and reach. It's all about expanding your reach, keeping it relevant to your audience, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got to resonate with them, create a rapport. So does that mean, like, sort of when you have a podcast, people do get in contact with you, and you sort of have that sort of one-on-one contact with your listeners?
Yeah, so I always say you should always, you know, provide your listeners with an opportunity to engage with you. So whether it's something as simple as doing some type of Q&A segment or poll, or asking them to, you know, send you a video clip or audio clip of, you know, their feedback on the show. or write you a quick little testimonial and you share it on the show. Like, always give an opportunity for people to be able to engage with you, because one thing I do know is that you, in order to build rapport, it's about building the relationship, but it's also about nurturing the relationship, right? And so some of us are really good at connecting with people, but some of us are not really good at nurturing the connection. And so that is just really about giving people opportunity to have a conversation with you. So if, for example, like on social media, if you make a post and someone comments on that post, respond to the comment. Like,
Yeah.
simple engagement will keep people wanting, one, engaging on what you're putting out, but then also will keep them kind of interested in what it is that you're doing. And so that's why I always say rapport is very important when you are building influence.
Yeah, right, of course. And sort of makes people feel included, and yeah, I suppose makes it a more personal experience for them when they're getting that sort of rapport with the people that they're listening to and stuff.
Yeah.
And so with the coaching, sort of how long do you normally coach people for before you say, like, if they've come to you with just an idea and they want to launch it, how long would you say it takes to sort of get somebody off the ground and then release them into the wild to sort of go ahead with their podcast sort of thing?
So my accelerator program is a 6-week program. And so what I do is I have a podcaster's course called Profitable Podcaster.
Yep.
And that course literally walks you through everything you need to do to start, build, and launch the program. Along with the course, you can join me for 6 weeks of implementation coaching. And the reason why I do that is because one thing I know to be true is implementation is key, right? You can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't do anything with it, you'll just be sitting on knowledge. And so with my accelerator program, I combine my course plus coaching. Then I allow you to listen to, do the task, and then when we meet, whether that's once a week or twice a week, however my client wants to do it for those 6 weeks, we're showing up and we're doing the work. So we're making sure that we have, like the RSS feed together. We have the name of the show. We're setting everything up so that at the end of those 6 weeks, they should be ready to go ahead and hit publish, and that first episode is ready to air.
Yeah, right. Beautiful. And you were saying, like, you sort of meet every week, and I would imagine this is sort of available over a larger geographical area, sort of maybe internationally, and you would do Zoom meetings once a week with your clients, and you might be able to help them, even people that aren't local to you would be able to use these services to potentially launch a podcast?
Absolutely. Yeah, I do everything virtually. So
Yeah.
I am a Zoom person. But yeah, absolutely. And so I did it that way because I do know that there are people that want to connect with me but may not be local to me. So
Yeah,
most of my
course.
clients don't live in my state. So meeting virtually is probably the easiest way to actually connect with them and help them get their podcast launched.
Yeah, beautiful. And the sort of demographic that you find coming to you, like I see it's sort of podcast her, and you work a lot with women and stuff. Do you have other demographics sort of come to you and ask for advice to start podcasts? Like you were saying, the LGBTQI community. Do you have many of them come and ask for your assistance? And
So I have mainly females, but men have been coming to me a lot lately. So I do have a few male clients that I have taken on. I decided to kind of broaden my audience to both men and women,
right.
regardless of gender expression.
Yeah.
Anyone that's really interested in starting, building, and launching their podcast, it's a good fit, because I feel like podcasting is for anyone. Anyone that feels like they have something to offer to an audience can start a podcast.
Absolutely. With the world of 8 billion people out there now, surely there's going to be somebody out there that sort of relates to what people want to talk about, and people might not even realise until they get out there and give it a go.
Yeah.
And I've seen somewhere that you have a new website maybe starting soon. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I revamped my website. It is now up and running. I had my web designer revamp it for me.
Oh, nice.
So on the website, you can still check out the podcast because I have a whole section to check out Hey Queen Thrive before the new season kicks off in January.
Yep.
But you'll also be able to access things like my courses, other ways to get in contact with me, how to get on my email list. You'll be able to see client testimonials. You'll also be able to see some of the features that I've had in the media. So it's really cool. I always tell people definitely go check it out. It's www.leahmforney.com.
Beautiful. Yeah, cool. That sounds good. And I've seen you were nominated for the 2023 Podcaster of the Year Awards by I Am Her International. How's all that going? Has that sort of been drawn yet?
So it hasn't been drawn. It will be announced in March. But yeah, I was definitely overwhelmed when I got the email that someone nominated me for Podcaster of the Year. I never do anything for accolades.
Yep.
I'm not that person, but it's always such a humbling experience when someone thinks enough of your work and what you do to say that you're deserving of an award. So fingers crossed, March 2023, I will know for sure whether or not I have won.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish you the best of luck with that as well.
Thank you.
So I think that just about covers all the main points I've been given here to have a chat with you about. Was there anything else you would like to add to the conversation before we wrap it up, Leah?
Yeah, so the only thing I will definitely say is if you are someone that is interested in the podcasting space, whether you're already a podcaster and looking to grow it or monetize it, or you're ready to start, definitely come kick it with me in my Facebook community called Profitable Podcaster Society. I would definitely love to have you. You can catch me live there 4 days a week where I'm training on different aspects of the podcasting space. So would love to have you as a member over there. So it's definitely Profitable Podcaster Society on Facebook.
Awesome. Sounds good. You're doing a lot of really good work, and I'm sure you're definitely going to connect with a lot of people. It sounds like you've got a lot of content that people can sort of get a hold of to guide them on their way to creating their own podcasts, and you're also doing some really good work in the way of sort of advocating for sexual assault survivors and thrivers. Thanks for being on tonight, Leah. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and we'll probably wrap this up for now, but you've been a great guest, and I wish you all the best with the awards. I hope you take home that award, and good luck with all your future endeavours.
Thank you so much for having me.
Not a problem. It's been a